Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Nick, and I'm here with a coaching video for week 4 of Explore God. In this week, we're discussing the question, is Christianity too narrow? And I want to give you just a couple of tips to help you navigate this conversation well. First thing, you're going to start the conversation by, again, looking at that Pulse of the World video. And one of the statistics that is thrown up in that video comes from a Barna study that was done that says that nearly half of all U.S. adults believe it doesn't matter what religious faith you follow because they all teach the same lessons. And one of the questions that you're encouraged to ask in your discussion leader's guide is to ask, what do you think about that statistic? Do you identify with that statistic? The reason why I would encourage you not to gloss over that question is because of the fact that this is a question and this is a viewpoint that not just non-Christians sometimes have, but even Christians sometimes hold. That there are people who are self-identified Christians who still believe that there are multiple paths to God, multiple paths to heaven, that all religions basically lead the same place. And the reason I can say that is because for a time I was one of them. As a young Christian, I had proclaimed that Jesus was my Lord and Savior, but I didn't necessarily believe that he was Lord and Savior for everybody. I believed that there were many different paths to heaven, even though I had kind of arrived at Christianity being the one that I personally identified with the most. And so the reason why this conversation point is so important is because you want to find out where the people in your group are at. Even if you have a discussion group that's made up of people who've been lifelong churchgoers, that everybody would say, I'm a Christian in that group, you might be surprised by some of the answers they give to this question. And the worst thing that you can do as a discussion leader is to jump down their throat at that point, okay, and say, well, that's wrong. You can't believe that as a Christian. Because remember that the title of this whole series is Explore God. You want people to explore where they are at, how they arrived there, and maybe what the next step is. And so I think the best thing that you can do is to kind of ask a follow-up question. If you have somebody who says, yeah, I would agree with that. I think there are multiple paths to God. To just simply ask the question, so how did you arrive at that conclusion? What is it that kind of led you to believe that there are multiple paths to God, that basically all religions teach the same thing? And then just let them share. It's going to be really helpful for you as a discussion leader to kind of know where your group is at. And the only way you're really going to find out is if you give them the space and the freedom to self-identify. This is kind of where I fall in this discussion. Okay, and I think just having an open conversation about that is really going to set up the Curiosity Collective video really well that comes later, where we're going to talk a little bit about exclusive truth claims. So, and really go deeper into how do we arrive at what we think about these things. Another thing that kind of comes up in the Pulse of the World video is several people talk about how intolerant Christians are. That there's this idea in our culture that if you hold to an exclusive truth claim, that automatically makes you kind of a bigoted, hateful, and intolerant person. And you may have some people who say, I really resonated with those comments. I would agree with those comments. And again, your job here as a discussion group leader is to simply ask some good follow-up questions and find out, well, what has reinforced that view for them? So a good follow-up question that you could ask is you could say, so what in your experience has contributed to this view that the Christians or the church are intolerant? Tell me a little bit about your story. What experiences have you had that have caused you to land there? And again, it's a great space to find out where people are and to really gain a deeper insight in how they arrived at the conclusions that they arrived at. Furthermore, by asking them the question, you're then encouraging them to be self-reflective. And I think that sometimes being self-reflective is the most powerful way that God speaks to us and actually helps us move in our journey. It goes much further than somebody simply jumping down your throat and trying to argue you into a certain way of thinking. Just get them to be self-reflective. Just ask the question. Sit back and listen. You might learn something. I hope you do, actually. And so that's what I'd say about the first part of the conversation. But then you are going to move into the Curiosity Collective video and a couple of things that I think are really worth exploring there and making sure that you're touching on in your conversations. First and foremost, this conversation is Christianity too narrow? It's not simply just about having exclusive truth claims. It's also about intolerance. There is a view in American culture that if you have an exclusive truth claim, that automatically means that you are somehow a bigoted, hateful person toward people who have a different view than you. That somehow having an exclusive truth claim when it comes to religion automatically puts you in a camp where you would fly planes into buildings or open fire on an abortion clinic. I think that that is a false step to make, but it is a view that many people hold. And so what comes out in the Curiosity Collective is this idea that just because we hold an exclusive truth claim doesn't make us intolerant. In fact, holding to some exclusive truth claims is actually a very, very good thing, a beautiful thing. And so you want to make sure that you call that out with some of the questions and that you invite people to reflect on that and explore that a little bit. I actually love how Corey ends the video talking about the charge that, some Christians are hypocrites. And he kind of says, I actually don't think that that's a strike against Christianity. I think rather that reaffirms exactly what the Christian message is that we're all hypocrites, that we're all in need of God's grace. That yes, I am going to fall short. But that's actually what our religion believes and professes. And so that's an invitation for me to be self-reflective and to be honest and to say, yes, I have fallen short. And this is exactly why I need Jesus. And that's part of the reason why holding this exclusive truth claim doesn't make us intolerant. Rather, it helps us all recognize that none of us is perfect. And so that there's grace there. It's something Alan Hirsch talks about in the video as well, is there's this fine line between truth and grace. And you have to be able to hold to both. That the truth that we confess is actually that we all need grace. And as a result, it doesn't make me a hateful, violent person, but rather helps me to see that I have a message that I can share with everybody because no one's perfect. And this is a message that is actually good news. So just a couple comments about that. A couple questions that kind of come up in this discussion guide that I think are worth highlighting here. Corey suggests, he talks about the story of the blind men and the elephant, and he kind of concludes it by saying, when people say that all religions are the same, that sounds really humble and tolerant. But then he goes on to say why that's actually an exclusive claim. I would make sure you ask that question. You kind of follow it up. Why does he go on to say that those claims are actually exclusive? And then ask the question, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that that's actually true? What are your reactions to that conclusion by Corey? Is a good question. Ask them, what do you make of the claim that actually we're all intolerant when it comes to exclusive truth claims, that we all have exclusive truth claims? You can say, what do you make of that? Maybe what are some of the ones that you hold? What are some of the exclusive truth claims that you personally hold on to? That's actually the last question in the discussion, but you could move it up depending on the flow the conversation is going through. Another really great question here is, what are some examples of situations in which most people believe that narrow ideas are good? It's a great question. Because again, what we want to highlight here is there are some exclusive truth claims that are actually really good to hold to. Things that are worth saying, no, there is really one right way, because this one right way is actually good for everybody. But you want to help them discover that. You don't just want to drop that as a propositional statement. You really want people to reflect and say, oh yeah, there are certain things that I hold, and to say, so what do you make of kind of the Christian claim that there are exclusive truth claims? Is that a kind of good truth claim? Why or why not? To help them see that really all religions and all philosophies make exclusive truth claims. And so we want to wrestle with that a little bit. So I think that those are really good questions. A couple other things that I would say too. One of the passages that often comes up when people talk about the exclusivity of Christianity, and I've heard both non-Christians and Christians cite it, is that passage from John 14. Where Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And non-Christians usually hold that up and say, see, this just shows that the Christians are exclusive and they want to keep people out. But one of the things I think might be helpful for you as a Christian reflecting on that verse is actually that verse is a very inclusive verse. When you think about it in its context. Jesus lived in a day where in his culture, the Pharisees said you had to do all of these things in order to be accepted by God. that before God would accept you, you had to live basically a perfect life, holding to all the commandments of Moses. Likewise, in the broader Greco-Roman world, there were hundreds of different gods that you could worship. There were constantly people searching for what is God really like, and how do I please God or the gods, and what does it actually mean to live a good life? And there was a lot of doubt and fear and confusion. And so for Jesus to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but through me, what he's saying is, he's saying, number one, you can come to know God even if you're not perfect. Even if you haven't kept the law perfectly, you can know God when you know me. Number two, he kind of strips away the doubt, and he's saying, if you've ever wondered what God is like, what his character is, what he thinks about you, you can look at me. God is not mysterious. He does not keep his opinion of you a secret until the end. Rather, Jesus wants you to know that he loves you. Jesus wants you to know what the right way is, because he desires to have a relationship, to not leave you guessing, to not leave you fearful, to not leave you in a place of doubt and uncertainty, but to help you see that the way to God is clear, and it's an open door, and it's an open door that comes to us through Christ. It's actually something that the music artist Propaganda in the video highlights. He's like, yeah, if you're looking for God, wouldn't you want to know where to find him? Wouldn't you want to know what the right way to go is? And that's really what Jesus is saying. He's saying, if you've ever wondered, you don't have to wonder anymore. So if that comes up in your conversation, that might be worth talking about a little bit. I'll leave that to you, knowing your group best, if that's something you want to share and initiate, or if that's something that you want to maybe just ask more questions, and should it come up, share with them. It might even be something that you want to leave them with in the conclusion and have them reflect on some more during the week. That could be another way that you handle that one. But I hope that these tips are helpful for you as you navigate this conversation. As always, don't forget to send them the resources, from the discussion guide after the discussion. Help them go a little bit deeper, really reflect on it some more, I think that they're really helpful for continuing the processing during the week. Of course, we'll be talking about it in church on the weekends. So if we've already covered this week in church, you could share the podcast with your group. If we haven't covered it yet and you're getting to the session before we talk about it, you could invite them to join you in church as we kind of wrestle with it together. But again, use the messages on the weekends as an additional resource to help you in continue to process these deep questions. So as always, I'm delighted that you guys are doing this study. Thank you for taking that risk, and I hope that God blesses you and guides you in your discussion around this very, very important topic. So have a great week.